Welcome back to Old School Sports and our Out of the Park Baseball 24 playthrough of the Buffalo Wings. And we are early in 2027, about 2.5 months away from the start of the second season of Buffalo as a Major League Baseball team. And we're facing a big decision. And in our last episode, I asked for help from the viewers in terms of making that decision. And there's dozens of comments on the episode, lots of different perspectives shared. And sincerely thank everyone who not only watches the episodes, but also those of you who opined and let me know what you think I should do with this interesting decision that we're potentially facing with the top prospect in our system, Andres Medina. As I've said before in previous series and previous episodes, without those of you who watch these episodes and without those of you who comment on these episodes and interact with me, I would just be a middle-aged man talking to himself in front of a computer. So the fact that you make this so interactive is something that I truly do appreciate. So thank you for watching, and thank you for those of you who shared comments with me. And the decision is, as I mentioned, on Andres Medina, who is the top prospect in our system, the number 16 prospect in baseball, an international amateur free agent signing that we made just about 3 years ago. And my concern with him, and the reason I'm even considering a trade, and many commenters have been pointing this out for many episodes at this point, he's really not developing with his bat at all. You can see he's hit under 200 at every stop he's had in the minor leagues so far, all in rookie ball. And when we look at his potential, it's deteriorating across all of the offensive categories, and he hasn't actually improved in anything in 2 years in the minors as far as his bat. I still love the potential glove. I still love the personality, and I still love the durability. But he's going to be turning 20 years old next year, and all we've seen is his potential as a hitter decrease, and we haven't seen his actual ability increase at all. And despite the personality and despite the great defense, if he's going to be a 138 hitter at the major league level, he's unplayable. So he's a guy that we have shopped a bit in recent months, haven't found an offer that we really liked. But we do have a couple of offers out for him now that are interesting, and this is what I really called upon viewers to share their thoughts with me about what we should do. And there were a couple comments saying that we should stick with Medina. We've got a couple years invested in him. As I talked about with the defense and the personality and the durability, if the bat does develop pretty close to his potential, he's still a very useful major league player. So there is certainly a big part of me that feels pot committed to Medina at this point, and I understand where those who suggested kind of seeing things through with him are coming from. But another option is to trade him for the 23-year-old pitcher Miguel Olivares, who's in the Minnesota Twins organization, viewed as the number 30 prospect in baseball, a right-handed pitcher who was 9-10 with a 4.60 ERA this past season as a rookie, largely as a 22-year-old. Potentially has plus stuff, plus movement and average control with a 4-pitch arsenal. He also has just about a year of service time in the majors, so another 5 years of control, 2 years at the major league minimum, and then 3 years of arbitration before he's a potential free agent. So he's a very young, very good pitcher that is a bargain potentially, and looks like he could definitely be a solid second or third starter for a good team. And there's at least one opinion that accepting this trade for Miguel Olivares is the direction to go. And given that he still has potential to improve his fastball, his slider, his movement, and his control, and he's also young and very cost effective, I get making the trade for Olivares. So that is the second of the three options that we're considering right now. But given that Olivares potentially has 60 stuff, 60 movement, and 50 control as a starting pitcher, I decided to just search for major league starting pitchers who met those criteria. And I'm honestly a bit surprised that there are only 4 major league pitchers who meet the criteria that, in a best case scenario, our scout thinks Olivares will achieve. Spencer Strider, veteran making big money. Hunter Brown, also 28 years old like Strider, not making big money. But the two guys that interested me most were Victor Lizarraga, 23-year-old who's already a 2-time All-Star and a Cy Young Award winner for Montreal. They had no interest in trading him for Medina, and they had really no interest in trading him, even if I put together a very fulsome package of 3 or 4 of the top prospects in our organization. But Andrew Painter of the Phillies is the third guy who we could pick up. He's basically the same age as Olivares, only 5 months older, but he's been in the major leagues for close to 4 years at this point. So he's already in his first arbitration year, only 2 arbitration years left, and then he's a potential free agent. So although he's the same age as Olivares, he is not as easy to digest from a financial perspective. But his stuff, movement, and control are all above average, and he's got a pretty impressive 4-pitch arsenal that our scout thinks is largely fully developed, although it looks like he could still add another notch to his changeup potentially. Like the extreme ground ball tendencies, I like that he throws in the mid to high 90s. I am a little flummoxed by the fact that an extreme ground ball pitcher who throws pretty hard with good movement on his pitches somehow led the National League last year with 33 home runs allowed. And when I look at the pitching stats of his career, a 4.86 ERA over 637 innings pitched suggests to me that although his ratings look really good, for whatever reason, he's not as good as he appears in a scouting report. But then I do look at the fact that over the course of his career, his ERA, or his SIERA, was 3.60, over a full run better than his actual ERA. And I, in the previous episode, looked, and it looked like he had some pretty miserable defense behind him with the Phillies. And I think that there's definitely some potential for him to be a very solid number 2 or 3 starter for a good team. And going with Painter was not the unanimous opinion from the commenters, but there were certainly more than a handful of comments that suggested Painter was the right way to go. And given that the ratings are very impressive, given that he's still a relatively young player, given that he's got slightly better stamina and holding runner ratings than Olivares, I totally get going with Painter as well. So I understand all 3 angles and all 3 views that were shared by commenters. And that's kind of the reason I asked, because I kind of saw a lot of the same pros and cons that the viewers outlined for me, and was looking for some 2nd, 3rd, 4th, 10th, 12th, 15th opinions. And I thank you for giving them to me. And I think at this point, I am going to move on from Medina, and I am going to follow the wisdom of the crowd and try to make a trade for Andrew Painter. You can see that with the financial situation that we're at right now, we actually have to have them keep a chunk of his contract to make this work. Our assistant GM says, don't do this deal. But I think it's the right way to go. We've added Shohei Ohtani and Shane Bieber to our roster this offseason to be our first and second starters. I think it's conceivable that Painter would take over the numbers 2 spot in the rotation behind Ohtani. And although my goal has just been to get this team from 71 wins to being a 500 team in its second season in Major League Baseball, I feel with that 1-2-3 punch potentially as our starting rotation, we can maybe compete for a wild card spot. It seems incredibly fast for an expansion team, and I agree it's incredibly fast, and I don't want to do anything to damage our future materially chasing a playoff spot. But I don't think that I'm doing that. Certainly Medina could still become a very good to excellent major league catcher. But I think the commenters who have been saying over the past several episodes that the bat just isn't going to develop, the evidence certainly suggests that when you look at the fact that he hasn't improved his ability at all and his potential in the batting categories just continues to look worse and worse to our scout. And we're also, it's not like we're trading for a 33-year-old guy who's going to be a free agent in a season. We're trading for a 23-year-old who's likely heading into the prime of his career. We've got him for 3 more years, including this upcoming season, as an arbitration-eligible player. And then he's a potential free agent who presumably we will try to sign and build around. So we're still getting a young and important cog in return. So I think I'm going to go ahead and try the deal. If you look closely in the last episode, you know that when I made the offer to Philadelphia, I only put it up to 35% of his contract and then submitted it. I'm going to try to see if maybe we can get them to keep just a little bit more of it, since it seems like they are really eager to bring Medina on board, and our scout thinks that this is just a horrible idea. And the Phillies are willing to do it. We're going to obviously monitor what happens with Medina over the course of his career. But those of you who have watched previous series that I've done know that I love to build around pitching and pitching with good defense. And bringing in a young pitcher like Andrew Painter is just too compelling for me to consider. So Andrew Painter, welcome to Buffalo. Andres Medina, we wish you the best of luck in your development with the Phillies organization. In taking a look at our prospective rotation for next year, it's going to be very different. Ohtani, Painter, and Bieber picked up by free agency, trade, and free agency. Sean Sullivan, the rookie from last season, will be back. Tyler McGill, who we signed as a free agent to anchor our staff, is already likely down in that 5th starter role. And Emmett Sheehan, who we picked up in the Rule 5 draft, we're going to at least take a look at him when we run a 6-man rotation in spring training to see if he can potentially become a useful player out of the bullpen or rotation for us. So the rotation and the pitching staff was a glaring weakness for us last season when we went 71-91. And with the additions of Ohtani, Painter, and Bieber, I don't think there can be any argument made that we haven't at least tried to act aggressively and boldly to improve our pitching staff. Whether it'll work on the field, we'll find out next season. Painter in particular will be a good example. Did he just need a change of scenery? Did he just need a different ballpark? Did he just need better defense behind him? Or is he really a guy who just does not perform as well as his ratings would make you think that he would? And we have, as we've been signing more and more players, been taking our player development budget and our draft budget down from where they were last season. We finally have taken a little bit out of our scouting budget at this point. We moved from the maximum 27 million down to 24 million. Put a tad more in the other budgets, but also tried to open up just a little bit of money available to give us the option if we actually somehow do end up in a race for a wild card spot in this upcoming season, would like to at least have a tiny bit of flexibility to add some contracts in a responsible way that doesn't pillage our farm system. And I think that gives us a little more ability to do that with those moves. The other decision that's going to really have a big impact on our money is whether Garrett Crochet makes the team. We picked him in the Rule 5 draft from the Dodgers. He's making almost $9 million this coming season. But he is a pitcher who, over the course of his major league career, has been a pretty darn good pitcher. Only 150 and 2/3 innings, but 200 strikeouts with a 132 ERA plus, 73 FIP minus, and 278 SIERA over that time frame. So I think he could be a really interesting arm for us out of the bullpen. The issue right now is that we've got a lefty in Javi Atencio who's likely to be our closer, another lefty in Brandon Williamson who wants to be our closer. And right now, our bench coach suggests using Crochet just as a lefty specialist, which is a pretty luxurious thing for a second-year expansion team to be spending almost $9 million a year on. So we'll have to see how he pitches in spring training. We'll have to see where we stand as far as injuries to some of these players. That could always change the dynamics and our expectations. But if we do decide to send Crochet back to the Dodgers, that would obviously open up a lot more money for us to play with. The issue is that by that time, our scouting and development and draft budgets will be set, so we won't be able to tweak scouting and development. Most likely, if we did let him go, a good chunk or all of the salary that we took off the books would be available for us to at least use in the draft. So it does give us a little more optionality if we move on from him as far as the finances. But clearly, if we don't make that decision before the preseason begins, we're going to be going into next year with somewhat lower scouting and development budgets than we have gotten used to in the past. And as the preseason does begin today, owner Joel Farmer has been impressed with what we've done in this offseason and just boosted our budget by $14 million. So that certainly makes it a lot easier for us to potentially keep Crochet on the team next year. And I guess we still, that's right. We've got till spring training, so we can also get our scouting and development budgets maybe not back. Actually, we can kind of get them back to where they were. I don't know if we need to go quite as hard in player development given the diminishing returns that kick in the $30 to $35 million range, but things really worked out well for us because we've got money to potentially bring on somebody right now if we do happen to be competitive. But we've also still investing heavily in the farm system and the player development that's going to be kind of critical to our potential long-term success here. So everything coming up Millhouse for the Buffalo Wings through this offseason so far, at least in my opinion. I know some of you disagree strongly with some of the decisions that we've made, most notably being the qualifying offer we made to being Christian Vasquez back as our catcher, and then also the trade we made to bring in the utility infielder Khalil Watson in the amount we gave up to do that are probably, in my view, of going through the comments, the two least popular moves that we've made so far this offseason. But overall, I'm really pleased with how this offseason has gone, and I'm looking forward to the upcoming season. But we still are just over a month away from the beginning of spring training, and we're also, I don't know why it doesn't show up anymore, because international amateur free agent signings should be taking place in mid-September, and it was on the calendar until we just hit the start of the preseason today. That's a bit odd. Huh. I had pushed the international amateur free agency back to mid February. So it started. The first month was mid November. Then we had December and January, where we have run 3 camps. But it doesn't look like we can run camps anymore. So I'm taking that to mean that the international amateur free agent signing period has just opened up for us, despite the fact that we didn't really get to run that 4th camp that we expected in February. And we haven't gotten an email saying what's going on. So that's a little quirky. You guys know that I generally don't tweak the settings too much, so I'm struggling to find what I'm looking for here with international amateur free agency. Okay, and I actually did go to the right screen before, but I just went through it too fast. So you can see it's been pushed to 15th of February 2028, but it was the 15th of February 2027, literally, I think, until the preseason began. So it looks like the signing period is open for international amateur free agents. So I think that's what we're going to spend some time on right now. And I probably am going to go back and change the date to have it finish up in mid-January again, even though it's kind of awkward that it starts in the middle of the playoffs. Apparently it didn't like the preseason beginning, and we ended up missing out on our final opportunity to run a camp and get to know these players and maybe even do some additional scouting to get to know them better. But regardless, we'll take a look at a couple of the top prospects. 2 of the guys that we've had in camp are Juan Guerra, a durable 16-year-old lefty, certainly with enough stamina to start. Looks like a 3-pitch guy with potentially plus stuff, average movement, a little above average control. And Ernesto Aguilar, another guy that we've had in camp, a potential 5-pitch arsenal. Pretty pedestrian stuff and movement, all things considered, even if he fully develops. Certainly has enough stamina to start. Ground ball pitcher throwing in the mid to low 90s at 16 years old is certainly an interesting prospect. Also take a look at Domingo Herrera. Pretty similar profile. He's got a wide variety of pitches, but none of them expected to be all that great. Looks like best case scenario is a 4th or 5th starter. And then Luis Serna seems like the best case scenario is probably a 5th starter. So the pitching prospects available in international amateur free agency this year, Not particularly impressive, but depending on how things go with the batters, maybe there will be something for us to consider with some of those pitchers down the line. So we'll now turn our attention to the hitters, and you can see the top 8 hitting prospects are the players that we had scouted at camp the 3 times that we had available. Obviously, if we had had that 4th time, we'd probably have very high scouting accuracy on them. So some of these tiny little bugs and quirks in the game are frustrating, but it is what it is at this point. Center fielder Rodolfo Carmona, at least according to our scout, is the stud of the prospects. Certainly looks like with well above average contact, outstanding gap power, excellent home run power, and an eye and avoid strikeouts that could be average-ish if he fully develops. Could be a pretty potent offensive player. Little older, at 17 years old, has pretty good speed, although he's not necessarily the greatest base runner and base stealer in history, and certainly more than average outfield range, a decent arm. His error rating is not great, but certainly looks like he could be a potentially very interesting bat, and a lot of power packed in that 5'9", $150 package for Mr. Carmona. Right fielder Julio Lugo, just about to turn 17 years old. Not great defensively. Incredible potential contact hitter, pretty average in the other batting ratings, not a ton of speed. Probably not the first guy that I'm going to go after. Honorato Ortega, 17-year-old out of Venezuela. Good contact, gap power, and home run power. Like the durability. Another guy that doesn't bring much to the table in terms of speed and defense, and a bit older for a international amateur free agent. Another older prospect, second baseman Arturo Lemus. Like the durability. Don't love the defensive profile. The arm, even for a second baseman, is pretty bad, and the turn double play rating is certainly not optimal for a second baseman, but looks like he could have an interesting bat. I know what you're thinking right now. Old school, you magnificent genius. You knew that there were going to be those 2 catchers, which helped you let go of Mr. Medina, because you're just going to get a new Medina here in international amateur free agency. And I wish that was the case, but I don't really think either of these prospects are quite what I thought Medina was going to be when we picked him up. Rogelio Black is the one that I am a bit more interested in. Looks like he could have a respectable-ish major league bat. He's got the high work ethic, which I love to see in prospects, and his catcher ability could be a little bit above average. Luis Devalle, don't love the below average catcher ability, do like the work ethic, do like the durability, and he certainly has an interesting bat. I'm always going to default towards defense at catcher, which is why I kind of think I prefer Rogelio Black over Luis Devalle. But either of them would be somebody to consider, but probably not our number one option, and certainly don't think either of them is going to be what we thought Medina was when we picked him up 3 years ago. But that is a sunk cost, and he's no longer even part of our organization at this point. So the successes and mostly failures associated with our work with Medina should have no impact on our decision-making going forward. Second baseman Nelson Ortuno, out of the Dominican. Like the batting profile, like speed and his ability to bunt, but the glove is meh, and the personality is worse than meh. Not the kind of guy that we'd go after. And then Arturo Romero is the other guy that we know reasonably well. Not a horrible batting profile for a shortstop prospect. Certainly has the range to play shortstop. Would love all of those other numbers to be a little better. But an interesting prospect, but probably not a frontline kind of guy, in my opinion. So I think Carmona is the highest potential prospect. So we're going to go ahead and get an offer out to him. See if maybe we offer him 2250, 2.25 million, which is about 450,000 more than he's asking for. I would think he's going to end up being bid up to the $4.5–5 million range ultimately. There's maybe some low probability that coming in with more than he's looking for initially, he signs with us quick. But right now, he's the only offer that we're going to put out there. I'm pretty committed to trying to get him on board. I think he is the best prospect. If we're able to get him for 2.25, even 3 million, that gives us options to go after some other guys. But right now, I want to make sure we bring him on board because I think that that bat is potentially really interesting if he fully develops. And not surprisingly, Carmona has interest from many teams, the Twins, the Braves, and the Angels. He's also saying that he likes his offer from Colorado. Looking for 2.8 million at this point. We're going to up that to 3.2 million. Get an offer out there and see what Mr. Carmona has to say. And not surprisingly, interest in Mr. Carmona remains high. The Reds, the Braves, and the Red Sox involved. Says he really likes the offer from the Reds at this point. I don't want to say we're pot committed at this point, but he's looking for every penny that we have. I think he's the best prospect out there, so we are going to meet his demand, submit the offer, and we're either going to get Carmona for every penny that we've got to spend in international amateur free agency this year, or we're going to be left scrambling to spend all of our money when likely him and a few of the other top prospects are off the board. And we've got Rodolfo Carmona signed, so he is at our international complex. We'll spend this whole year there as a guy who's just barely 17 years old. Maybe we will bring him up to rookie ball in 2028, but would expect that he would be ranked as one of the better prospects in our system when we are re-ranked in a month and a half or so. Right now, thinking about prospects, ranked 16th overall. The departure of the top prospect in our system in Mr. Medina took us down significantly in the ratings. We don't have a real top prospect anymore, although we really like Deshaun Seifu. But we still have 3 top 100 prospects. It's just that we've lost the best prospect in our system, and that certainly left a mark in terms of how the evaluators of the various minor league systems view ours. And with the signing that we've made, obviously, international amateur free agency is over for us. Very simple. We brought Carmona on board. We have $0 left to spend. So doesn't matter if we wanted to try to bring on somebody else. We are done for the year. And we've made it to the start of spring training, so hope is going to spring eternal for our Buffalo Wings this year. Right now we've just got the 38 players on the 60 who are on the 40-man roster in camp. Clearly we're going to be bringing up a number of players from our AAA and AA teams and maybe even some of the top prospects at other spots in the organization to round out our roster and get a look at as many players as possible here in spring training 2027. And as we're nearing the end of spring training, it's been a pretty productive spring for the Buffalo Wings, 12-9 records. So we've certainly been pretty respectable on the field. More importantly, no real injuries. Daniel Espino is a guy who we picked up in the Rule 5 draft. He had a torn UCL. We knew he was going to open the season on our 60-day IL. We'll put him on a 30-day rehab assignment when he's finally healthy, and then decide whether he's someone who's going to stay in our organization or not, given that we think his movement and his control are both questionable whether he's going to end up making the team or not, but it's at least a free option to have him around. Other than that, nobody is really banged up at this point. Looking at our six-man pitching rotation, Ohtani, not surprisingly, has been great. Painter's been respectable. Bieber's been pretty good. And the other three guys, Sean Sullivan, Tyler McGill, and Emmett Sheehan, have not been good, admittedly, in pretty small sample sizes. And it's also the spring, so nothing to get too concerned about at this point. And you may remember from 2 or 3 episodes ago at this point that we got pretty lucky, and we moved up to second from, I think it was either 7th or 9th when the draft lottery took place. And you can see Nashville, the other expansion team, and they were better than us on the field last year. I think they won 76 games rather than the 71 that we won. But they're going to be back and picking at 14th. So the fact that we've got the second pick is pretty attractive, and we have moved the draft up to happen a couple weeks earlier than it does in OOTP in the Major League these days, going a little bit old school, putting it back to mid to late June. That'll allow us to have our rookie ball players that we pick in the draft get an extra 2 to 3 weeks potentially of actual action. So, maybe 10 or 15 extra games for a lot of the players, which on the margin probably helps their development. So we, with the earlier draft, the draft pool was just released. Obviously, we don't know a ton about a lot of these players. Our scouting accuracy needs to be improved across the board, and hopefully it will be. And clearly there's something funky going on here with the database with a player named 0160 Ostendorf, who is a starting pitcher with the nickname the God of Batting. And he certainly does not look like he is a potential god of batting. So I may end up editing him just so he has a name that doesn't look like it was given to him by Elon Musk. But taking a look at a couple of the optically top pitching prospects, Walt Becerra, 17-year-old left-handed pitcher, love the work ethic, potential 3 to 4 pitch arsenal, certainly enough stamina to start, excellent at holding runners, potentially plus stuff, movement, and control. He's a pretty interesting prospect, but our accuracy on him is low at this point. Rocky Bennett, a reliever, certainly not going to draft him number 2 overall. Ben Kramer, a young starting pitcher, looks like a 3-pitch guy, but still plus stuff and plus control with potentially exceptional movement and ground ball tendencies. So pretty hard to hit the ball out of the park against Kramer. And then Ostendorf, 0160 Ostendorf, looks like a guy with a potential 5-pitch arsenal, including a knuckle curve. Stuff off the charts, movement and control really well, high work ethic and intelligence. Certainly the stamina and hold runners ratings necessary to be successful. He's durable. He's committed to Duke. We'll have to see what our scouting accuracy ends up looking like on him, but certainly on first view, 0160 Ostendorf looks like a very interesting prospect. Taking a look at the top batters available, and right now we think there's only three 5-star guys Shortstop Joe Edwards. Not the most exciting prospect in the world to me. I mean, he's going to draw a ton of walks. He can hit homers. The defense is not exceptional. Don't necessarily view him as a number one overall pick. Kurt Fagroa, first baseman. Bat, pretty solid. Don't love the personality. And then Tatum Marsh, a 21-year-old center fielder out of Stanford. Decent defensively. Mass speed. Potentially above average contact and home run power. Everything else kind of mediocre-ish. I could see us ending up with a pitcher in this draft. Now, again, scouting accuracy is not optimal on a lot of these guys. The draft pool was just released. We've got months of game time and days of real life time until we'll need to make that decision. But going to be some interesting decisions ahead of us. Joey Moore looks like a college player who's a 2-star potential already. Love the speed. Outfield defense, pretty middling. Potentially interesting bat. Would love a little more home run power, but contact and gap power potentially excellent with a really good eye in avoiding strikeouts and that speed. He's not a horrible prospect, but from a very cursory first look, you know as much about these guys as I do, because the only time I've spent looking at them, I've spent talking through with you over the past few minutes. Kind of think I'd probably be leaning pitcher number 2 overall. We'll also take a look here at Dave Krill, another starting pitcher prospect. Kind of like the potential 4 to 5 pitch arsenal. The control is the concern. The stuff and the movement look potentially exceptional, but he's going to walk a lot of batters, but he is durable, does have the high work ethic. So I think between Krill, 0160 Ostendorf or Ostendorf, I think I'm going to go with Ostendorf, and then Walt Becerra. We'll get to know these guys a lot better. I mean, we're low accuracy on Becerra. We're average on Ostendorf. We are very high on Krill, but I could see us ending up with one of those 3 pitchers with the number 2 pick in the draft. Again, from an admittedly 10-minute review of these players with incomplete information and not having spent a lot of time on it. And before we took a look at the minor league players, I was pleased with the fact that there were no real injuries during spring training, and that obviously jinxed us, not jinxed it. That jinxed us. Kevin Made, our starting shortstop, going to be out for 5 weeks with a sprained wrist. So that is definitely a bummer to start the season. At least we've got over a week till the season actually starts, so at least some of that time is just going to be spring training. But certainly disappointing for a team that we are expecting to be much better this upcoming season, to lose our starting shortstop before the season is even underway. And we now finally have made it to the end of spring training. 46 players that we're going to need to cut down to 26. We've already talked about Espino, who will put on a rehab assignment when he's finally healthy, see what we have there, as well as Kevin Made, who hopefully we'll have back at the major league level sometime in early to mid-May if everything goes well. Taking a look at the spring standings, ended up 14-12, so faded a little bit over the last week and a half or so of the spring, but still we're in the first division, one of 4 teams in the NL East with a winning record in spring training. Our counterpart expansion team, heading into its second year, also in Nashville, also went 14-12, so some clear parallels between those 2 teams in spring training for whatever it's worth. as we start trying to get 21 pitchers down to 13 that we will bring north to Western New York with us. We're obviously going to go with 5 starters, and Otani, Painter, Bieber, Sullivan, and McGill are going to be who we go with. Tyler McGill was not good this spring. That 5th spot is not his for an eternity, but we'll at least give him a chance to pitch more than 10 2/3 innings at the major league level before potentially going in a different direction. We gave the Rule 5 pick, Emmett Sheehan, a chance. He did not do much better than McGill in the spring. We'll give him a chance to see if perhaps he can still make the team. We're going to have to go through and make those cuts next. But the newcomers, Otani, Painter, and Bieber, heading up the rotation, followed by the holdovers, Sullivan and McGill, will be the Buffalo Wings 5-man pitching staff at the start of the 2027 season. And we've made it to our 26-man roster. As I mentioned, Otani, Painter, Bieber, Sullivan, and McGill are our starters at the start of this season. Javier Atencio, the lefty, is going to be back as our closer. Bryce Miller and Misael Tamaez back as right-handed setup men. Mike Burrows and Raylan Perez also back in the bullpen. Brandon Williamson, a lefty, and Mike Baumann back as a righty long reliever. And we did keep Garrett Crochet on the team. The boost in money that we got from ownership at the start of the preseason helped convince us that we could keep him around. Love the stuff in the movement. The control is not great, but as we talked about earlier, he's been a pretty effective pitcher over the course of his career. Gives us a 3rd lefty out of the pen, which could be important since we only have 1 lefty in the rotation. Emmett Sheehan, Rule 5 pick, was a tough cut. We sent him back to the Dodgers. A couple of other tough cuts for us among the pitchers, notably Cam Wynn, Humberto Rosado, and Max Meyer, who all spent time with the big club last year, as well as Hideyasu Oki, who was a minor league free agent signing of ours about a year and a half ago. Ronan Kopp, a prospect who we picked in the expansion draft. Some of the better pitchers in our organization who ended up getting shuffled out of Buffalo and down to Albany in the International League. Turning to our everyday players, Christian Vasquez back as our starting catcher with Israel Pineda as his backup once again. Free agent acquisition Romash Tasuku Naka. We've been training him at first base in the preseason and spring training. That's where he'll start. Khalil Watson, with the injury to Made, is not just a utility infielder, but a starting second baseman for us against right-handed pitching. Nolan Jones back in a utility role. Jordan Westberg back at 3rd base. Tommy Edman and Eledmis Diaz, who had been with us in Albany for a couple years in a row, bided his time, and at close to 37 years old is back in the major leagues with the potential for Made to come back from his injury. Diaz's time on the roster may not be long, but he did make the team, turn into our outfield. Reigning Rookie of the Year Loydell Chappelli, reigning Rookie of the Year runner-up Jace Barofin, both back. Johnny DeLuca and Miguel Blaise, 2 acquisitions from this offseason. We'll be splitting time in center field at times, although DeLuca's actually going to be starting in left against left-handed pitching somewhat oddly. We're a little short of he's a right-handed batter, but we're a little short of right-handed batters, quite honestly. Could certainly make an argument that either Barofin or Chappelli or even the switch hitter Edman, maybe not optimal to be starting them against left-handed pitching, but it is what it is. And then Eric Pena, the 24-year-old who we also picked in the expansion draft, hit a lot of home runs between AA Utica, AAA Albany, and the majors with Buffalo last year, and he makes the team as an outfielder for us. Also, the notable cuts among the everyday players, Vance Honeycutt, the 23-year-old, think that he could be playing a prominent role in our outfield at some point this year, but he's going to start in Albany. And then Deshaun Seifu, last year's number 1 overall pick. We are going to keep the number 38 prospect in baseball down for at least a month and a half or so, I think, to get our service time back and well manipulated with him. Not a huge issue, quite honestly, given how good we've done financially and how generous our ownership has been. But it's fair. He hit 220 in Albany and 217 in the majors last year. We still think there's potential for him to get better, and there's still potential for him to get a little more refined defensively at second, third, and short. So he'll probably be down until mid-May to mid-June. I would think we'd be targeting to bring him up. The negative things is that in terms of his potential, although he still could get to a 75 contact, Scout doesn't think he's going to get to an 80 contact anymore. Scout doesn't think he could get up to a 50 discipline, and Scout doesn't even think he can get up to 35 home run power. So definitely going to be reliant on hopefully getting that contact rating up a couple more notches and just becoming an excellent contact hitter who takes advantage of his speed to generate a ton of extra base hits. So we will see what Seifu can do down in AAA. Brady House, who was up a little bit at the end of last year, and Nick York, who was up all season and actually hit 292, was probably the most surprising and most difficult cut, especially given his bat. But he's not the most refined defensive player and not the most talented defensive player. That said, we're going to enjoy the time or take advantage of the time more accurately down in AAA to hopefully get him a little better at left field, maybe even train him a little bit at right field, although his arm is not optimal for a right fielder, just to improve his versatility, but certainly not a happy birthday for Nick York to find out that he didn't make the 26-man roster out of spring training. And we've simmed ahead a couple days to opening day. Owner Joel Farmer wants us to play 500 ball. I think that's certainly a reasonable goal for us. Looks like the Stars are going to be starting off at the Yankees, and our Buffalo Wings are going to be hosting the Miami Marlins on opening day as Shohei Ohtani makes his debut for us. Top 100 prospects list has been published. You can see there are no Buffalo Wings among the top 10 players. Tanner Shillette is a catcher that don't love his glove, but certainly has an interesting bat. He was a guy that was in the mix for us to pick up for Medina in the not-so-distant past, but we obviously passed on that deal and have moved on from Medina at this point. Take a quick look at how our organization is rated, and our minor league system is viewed as 13th overall. The depth is okay, still 6 top 100 players. As I noted, I thought that Carmona, who we signed only 2 months ago as our one international free agent signing, thought that he would show up in the top 100 list, and he does at number 76 overall. Obviously, the two guys who are most likely to help us in the near term are Seifu, last year's number 1 overall pick, and Vance Honeycutt, who is a guy who we picked in the 8th round in 2024 and has developed pretty well. Both of those guys are going to be starting the year in AAA, but likely to help us at some point over the course of this upcoming Major League season. Before we finish off, we'll take a look at the preseason predictions. Looking over at the American League in the East, Nashville projected to be in last place at 75 and 87, a game worse than before. Interesting that the Yankees, who were the only 100-win team in baseball a year ago and made it all the way to the World Series, are projected to dip and have a losing record this year. I do think, and we've talked about this in the comments, and people have shared some information in previous episodes, this is not always necessarily the most accurate system in the world that comes up with these simulated statistics. Taking a look at the NL East, high expectations for our Buffalo Wing, at least in this simulation, 91 and 71, 3 games behind the Mets for the division, but we would be a wild card team if that scenario materializes. They're not seeing that we're going to have any big-time offensive players, but they are expecting pretty solid seasons as starting pitchers from the 2 of the 3 big new additions in Shohei Ohtani and Andrew Painter. So we will start finding out how this 2027 season actually goes in our next episode. Until then, thank you so much for watching, and hope you have a great day.